Hello everyone, it's been a while, and I hope you're all doing well. I am still waiting for some spare parts for my printer. I will have to replace the Z-screws, which is why I can't print as many models as I'd like to at the moment. But let's jump right into today's topic. Recently, I have started a poll what the next video should be about, and the results were pretty conclusive. It's the first video that is not going to be a guide for a specific issue, and instead covers a more abstract topic. I plan to make this an ongoing series where I discuss and talk about all sorts of things surrounding the hobby of FDM miniature printing. We all print for different reasons, and with those reasons come different expectations and standards. Someone who just wants to print a couple of proxies for their wargaming session is on average going to have a different quality standard for their models than someone who prints because they want to have miniatures for their D&D campaign, and someone who prints because they want to have minis for their D&D campaign is going to have, yet again, different standards and quality expectations than someone who prints because they want to paint and display the models. I don't mean this in an elitist kind of way. None of the groups are superior to the others, but I think it would be intellectually dishonest to pretend that those differences don't exist. I firmly place myself in the latter category, printing because I want to paint and display my models. Or at least that's what I'm telling myself as I continue to ignore the ever-growing pile of shame in my corner. Regardless, this means that the surface quality is the most important aspect for me, as any imperfections not only impact the overall visuals, but also the way paint behaves on the model. Unfortunately, once you reach a certain level of quality and optimization, the actual design of the model becomes more important than your settings, hardware, and choice of filament. Something like an Adeptus Mechanicus Tech Priest, for instance, with 20 tubes and pipes sticking out their back, requiring dozens of supports, is always going to look worse than something like a more basic vehicle. I am strictly talking about surface quality, not how aesthetically pleasing the design is or how much I like it personally. If you want to truly maximize the quality of your prints, then you'll have to take model design into consideration, and that can feel a bit restrictive. There are certain design elements that simply don't work well with FDM printers. So we gotta ask the question, what makes a model FDM friendly? I want to start with the most obvious and impactful factor, that being supports, or rather lack thereof. When it comes to supports, you'll run into three different categories. The first one are pre-supports. These are supports that the sculptor provided, and they are meant to be used on a resin printer. Quick note here, I'm aware of both Painted for Combat's Resin to FDM tool, as well as Arbiter Miniature's Advanced FDM Design Philosophy. I'm not going to cover them here, because I want to talk about those in a separate video, so for now, assuming you don't modify them further, pre-supported models will not work well on FDM printers. Chances are that you're not going to be able to print these miniatures at all. That's why a lot of sculptors include support-free versions of their models. And this is the first potential issue, because support-free is not the same as supportless. Support-free models still require supports, they just aren't pre-supported, meaning that you'll either have to manually place them yourself or have them auto-generated by a slicer. This, at the very least, makes them significantly more printable than pre-supported resin-style models, but you still have to deal with imperfections. Support scarring, supports might fail, etc. Supportless models, on the other hand, don't require any supports, which is why I think that calling them supportless is actually a bit of a misnomer. A much more accurate terminology would be self-supporting models, because that's exactly what they do. They are designed so that there aren't any floating regions or extreme overhangs, and without those, you don't need supports. This makes them inherently the most FDM friendly in terms of design, not just in terms of surface quality, but also in terms of printability. No supports means less surface imperfections, yes, but it also means less potential points of failure and less print time. Now, does that mean that all you have to do is to look for supportless models and you're going to be fine? Short answer is yes, and the long answer is also yes. However, first, focusing entirely on supportless models is very limiting. Some people, like myself, are okay with that. More and more sculptors are offering supportless models, with some, like FDM Miniatures, even specifically designing with FDM printers in mind. But in the grand scheme of things, when taking all available models into consideration, the ones that are supportless don't even make up a fraction. So if you're looking for something specific, in particular something from, say, the Warhammer 40k universe, you're probably not going to find much, if anything. However, secondly, even among the supportless models, there are certain levels to their printability, and those levels can also be applied to the models that still require supports, because they are inherently linked to the composition of the model. By composition, I mean everything that makes up the design, not just level of detail, but also the shape of the model and the pose. This is where I want to introduce a concept that I'd like to call the 3 C's of composition. Now, I'm sure that there is already an established terminology for this. I doubt that I'm the first to cover this topic, but that's what I decided to go with. Namely, those are challenging composition, complementary composition, and critical composition. Certain shapes work much better or worse than others when it comes to FDM printing. And to visualize what I mean, I'm going to open up Microsoft Paint, of all things, and draw a circle. Now, at first glance, there aren't any issues here, but upon closer inspection, you'll notice that this is not a perfect circle. It has rough edges and isn't perfectly smooth. If we zoom in even further, we'll see why. This isn't a circle at all. The pixels are just a bunch of short, thin lines stacked on top of each other so that when viewed from a distance, they give the illusion of a circle. And if that sounds familiar, that's because it should. Even though extremely simplified, that is pretty much how an FDM printer works as well, only in a 3-dimensional space. At the end of the day, no matter how complex or intricate the model is, it's just a bunch of lines stacked on top of each other. And the visibility of those lines depends on their alignment to the previous and following layers. Or in other words, the further away the layers are from being exactly on top of each other, the more visible the layer lines will become. This is an inherent limitation of FDM printing because of how the technology works, and is something called stair stepping. This is what makes the difference between the geometry of our render or model and the geometry of what we actually end up printing. Let's move this to our slicer and take a closer look at the 3D equivalent of our circle, a sphere. We have to keep in mind that we are just layering lines on top of each other. That means, while the render of our sphere might look like this, what our machines will actually print, because of the physical limitations, will look like this. You can still see the outline of the sphere, but the lines can't perfectly replicate the shape. The reason why spherical objects in particular are so affected by this is because the further away you move from the midsection, the steeper the angles become. And on top of that, the individual lines have an increasingly shorter distance that they can cover. This means that the closer you get to either the top or the bottom, the more of the previous layers will remain visible. Just compare the lines in the midsection to the ones at the top, and you'll see just how little the top layers can cover the previous ones. When looking at the sphere from above, this is even more noticeable and will result in a drastic surface imperfections that will create these ripples. Now, this is all nice and well, but what does this have to do with printing miniatures? After all, we're printing dragons and knights and wizards. We're not printing basic shapes. But actually, we kinda do. Because if you take a model, any model for that matter, break it down into segments and then simplify those segments, what you eventually end up with are just basic shapes. A head or a skull will become a sphere, a sword will become a cylinder, a torso might become a rectangular prism, a shield will become a flat triangular prism. Now, while these shapes don't reflect the final design, they could be considered the skeleton of the model, and with that also affect the printability. You can mitigate those imperfections by decreasing the layer height or by increasing the size of the model, but ultimately this is something that will always be present. You can't get rid of the stair stepping entirely. So models that, when you break them down, contain a lot of ellipsoids will fall into the challenging composition category, resulting in a surface quality that won't be as good as the one for a model that has fewer ellipsoids in its design. A few examples for this would be skulls, heads, orbs on a wizard staff, pearls, eyes, maces, and more. At this point, I want to clarify and emphasize something though. When I say challenging composition, I'm not trying to say that the model is of poor quality or that trying to print it will inevitably result in an ugly print. Instead, it just refers to design elements that will clash with the limitations of FDM printing. But that doesn't mean that the model will look awful. Imagine having two athletes. One of them is a marathon runner and the other is a sprinter. Both of them participate in a 10-kilometer race. Now, the marathon runner is probably going to have a better time doing this. However, it would be crazy to jump to the conclusion that the sprinter is a poor athlete because of this. They are still going to get good results, it's just that they are partaking in an activity that doesn't fit well into their skill set. And that brings us to the complementary composition. Design elements that actually work well with FDM printing. These can mostly be summarized by saying that the more the shape consists of straight lines, the less it's going to be affected by stair stepping. If we take a look at a cube, for instance, you can see the difference right away. Here, the layers are perfectly aligned with each other, making the individual layer lines much less visible, even when printing on a high layer height. Another good example would be a pyramid. Here, as we get closer to the top, much like with the sphere from earlier, we do have some stair stepping. That's because, once again, the top layers don't fully cover the layers below. However, unlike with the sphere, with a pyramid, that misalignment of layers is much more consistent and steady. You don't have any major jumps when it comes to the length of the individual lines. Comparing the top of the pyramid directly to the top of the sphere, you can see that the pyramid shortens gradually, whereas the sphere shortens suddenly. As a side note, this is also what makes layer lines in general far more visible. Usually it's assumed that the layer height is the only thing that affects the visibility of layer lines, but really that's more of a multiplier for the actual issue. Because what makes the layer lines stand out is not inherently their height, but the irregularities between the individual lines. That's why when printing, even with larger layer heights, something like a cube will always look pretty decent, and it's also why a lot of the methods to hide layer lines don't work as well as people claim that they do. Finally, there is critical composition. Now, you might be tempted to think that that's the same as challenging composition, only cranked up to 11, but that's not really the case. Instead, where challenging composition refers to design elements that might result in suboptimal surface quality, critical composition refers to design elements that will lead to potential points of failure. So while the challenging composition might lead to some imperfections, critical composition might prevent you from successfully finishing the print at all. The most obvious example of this would be a model that requires an excessive amount of supports. With supports come additional risks because they can fail, and if they do, so does usually the rest of the model. Another example would be a model that has a lot of thin, narrow parts that are isolated from the rest of the model. For instance, take a look at this supportless model, the Battle Build Mage by Rocket Pig Games. I really like this model. The main body of the mage isn't an issue, but the staff is extremely narrow, thin, and not connected to the model itself until the last fourth of the miniature. This makes it extremely fragile, even if you have a little bit of over-extrusion, or if your nozzle is slightly misaligned, then it only has to hit the staff once in the earlier stages of the print for it to either bend or downright break before it can connect to the arm of the miniature, which would provide more stability. That is a good example of critical composition. Even though the model itself is great because it doesn't contain a lot of ellipsoids, it is highly vulnerable to print failures. The good news is that critical composition can almost always be circumvented by calibrating your printer, which is another thing that sets it apart from the challenging composition. With the correct settings, hardware and printer, you can minimize the latter, but you can't fully get rid of it. It's always going to be a part of the printing process. Critical composition, on the other hand, can usually be prevented entirely, but whenever it does cause an issue, it is far more catastrophic than anything challenging composition would do. I'd like to wrap things up here because the topic is already fairly abstract when compared to the calibration guide. In the next episode, I'll go into more detail regarding the 3 types of composition by examining different models to highlight how everything works out in practice. Until then, as always, thank you for watching and have fun printing.